Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am delighted to be sitting here today with Elizabeth Wicks. Buongiorno, Elizabeth.
Buongiorno.
Thanks so much for coming. Liz is a conservator and a restorer who's been living in Florence for quite some time. You're originally from the US. So I'd like to start by asking you about your journey. So how you got to Florence and how you got into restoration work.
Okay, well, my journey is not a very unique one in the sense that I came like so many of us on my junior year abroad. My dad was a painter, an artist, a professional artist, and an art history professor. Okay. So he led study abroad trips to Europe. So I knew the study abroad sector even from a personal experience with having a father who did that. And I came here and I first learned there was such a thing as art conservation when I went to look at the Cimabue, which had been unveiled not very many years before I was here. And I was stunned and realizing what had gone on in Florence during the flood and how it became a center not only for the mud angels but also for the restoration of cultural works all over the world. I thought, this is something I'm interested in. So my background in college was history and art history, and I worked for a year for a conservator in Washington, D.C., and then came back to do graduate work first at Syracuse with the MA program in Italian Renaissance art.
Okay.
And then a graduate school, which at the time existed in San Domenico, near Fiesole, Villa Schifanoia.
That's right.
Which is now part of the
EUI.
The EUI.
Right.
So I did my 3 years there, and then I got a National Museum Act grant, a postdoc grant, if you were, to do research in the field of conservation. And I was very interested not only in paintings but in sculpture and frescoes. And so my research project led me to Carrara, to Lucca, to Pisa, to Rome, to the Forum. I was studying patina on marble with the University of Pisa, so that was very cool. And I ended up getting hired by the company that was doing the restoration of Lucca Cathedral. So that was my first job on the facade of Lucca Cathedral, which was quite exciting.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And how did that feel? I mean, you were sort of a novice. I mean, you had done your studies, but this was the beginning of your career, am I right?
Right. I had done work in art restoration in Washington, D.C., so that was a very varied background with a very professional conservator. So I had that. But, you know, here, and this was back many decades ago at this point, it was really like starting over. And my professors weren't necessarily people that had gone had university training at all in their field. They had come up by their bootstraps through the hard work of working in the botteghe with restorers. So basically, they were, I got a lot of pushback, A, about being a woman in the field, and B, about being somebody who had a graduate school education, because nobody had a graduate school education in conservation in Italy. All of our professors had gone to art school. And so the field was really changing. And so that part of it was interesting. I remember my first day on the job, and my boss said, "Oh, it's such a pity that you're a woman." Because he wanted somebody, he wanted somebody to be tough enough to be on the facade in a zoot suit. We were cleaning with pressure guns and all of this stuff. And so it was a challenge.
And what happened at the end? I mean, did he have anything to say? When
No. We women on the job got them to change their minds.
I'm sure. Yeah. And how has the field changed?
Well, it's changed a lot. When I was studying, there was a real separation between the conservation world in the U.S. and in Britain with respect to how it was in Italy and some of the other countries in Europe. Where it was considered, because of this not having an educational background and more of a scientific background, it was considered that here everybody was more of an artisan, whereas the professionals were in the United States. And that has, really been turned on its head. Although people in the United States respected certain aspects of Italian conservation, there was always this dichotomy and a little bit of tension between the two worlds. And that has totally changed as procedures have.
Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am delighted to be sitting here today with Elizabeth Wicks. Buongiorno, Elizabeth.
Buongiorno.
Thanks so much for coming. Liz is a conservator and a restorer who's been living in Florence for quite some time. You're originally from the US. So I'd like to start by asking you about your journey. So how you got to Florence and how you got into restoration work.
Okay, well, my journey is not a very unique one in the sense that I came like so many of us on my junior year abroad. My dad was a painter, an artist, a professional artist, and an art history professor. Okay. So he led study abroad trips to Europe. So I knew the study abroad sector even from a personal experience with having a father who did that. And I came here and I first learned there was such a thing as art conservation when I went to look at the Cimabue, which had been unveiled not very many years before I was here, and I was stunned and realizing what had gone on in Florence during the flood and how it became a center not only for the mud angels but also for the restoration of cultural works all over the world. I thought, this is something I'm interested in. So my background in college was history and art history, and I worked for a year for a conservator in Washington, D.C., and then came back to do graduate work first at Syracuse with the MA program in Italian Renaissance art.
Okay.
And then a graduate school, which at the time existed in San Domenico, near Fiesole, Villa Schifanoia.
That's right.
Which is now part of the
EUI.
The EUI.
Right.
So I did my 3 years there, and then I got a National Museum Act grant, a postdoc grant, if you were, to do research in the field of conservation. And I was very interested not only in paintings but in sculpture and frescoes. And so my research project led me to Carrara, to Lucca, to Pisa, to Rome, to the Forum. I was studying patina on marble with the University of Pisa, so that was very cool. And I ended up getting hired by the company that was doing the restoration of Lucca Cathedral. So that was my first job on the facade of Lucca Cathedral, which was quite exciting.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And how did that feel? I mean, you were sort of a novice. I mean, you had done your studies, but this was the beginning of your career, am I right?
Right. I had done work in art restoration in Washington, D.C., so that was a very varied background with a very professional conservator. So I had that. But, here, and this was back many decades ago at this point, it was really like starting over. And my professors weren't necessarily people that had gone had university training at all in their field. They had come up by their bootstraps through the hard work of working in the botteghe with restorers. So basically, they were, I got a lot of pushback, A, about being a woman in the field, and B, about being somebody who had a graduate school education, because nobody had a graduate school education in conservation in Italy. All of our professors had gone to art school. And so the field was really changing. And so that part of it was interesting. I remember my first day on the job, and my boss said, it's such a pity that you're a woman. Because he wanted somebody, he wanted somebody to be tough enough to be on the facade in a zoot suit. We were cleaning with pressure guns and all of this stuff. And so it was a challenge.
And what happened at the end? I mean, did he have anything to say? When
No. We women on the job got them to change their minds.
I'm sure. Yeah. And how has the field changed?
Well, it's changed a lot. When I was studying, there was a real separation between the conservation world in the U.S. and in Britain with respect to how it was in Italy and some of the other countries in Europe. Where it was considered, because of this not having an educational background and more of a scientific background, it was considered that here everybody was more of an artisan whereas the professionals were in the United States, and that has, really been turned on its head.
Yeah.
Although people in the United States respected certain aspects of Italian conservation, there was always this this dichotomy and a little bit of tension between the two worlds, and that has totally changed as procedures knowledge has become more worldwide, and procedures have, developed in both countries, and there's a lot more respect on both sides for what is happening in the field.
And I mean, that makes sense, right? Because you're all working toward a common goal, which is also, keeping this incredible cultural patrimony, in as good of shape as possible, and so
that's what we're trying to do,
and exchanging knowledge. And I imagine now it must be an exciting time as well, just because of the velocity of technology. And I wonder how that's affected the work you do as well. I know you did a recent. I'm in awe of your work. Can I just say it? As someone who has no talent whatsoever with anything, in the visual arts, I'm very envious of the fact that you're able to touch these works, and that you have the talent to do that, and the skill, the years of study, of expertise, of hands-on work. So you recently did a really important high-profile restoration, which I really would like you to talk about, which is an Artemisia Gentileschi painting. And I get chills just thinking about how it must have been to be working on that. Can you talk to me about that experience?
Well, that was a very, very special moment in my career, and a very, very exciting project to work on. And I'm so thankful to both Casa Buonarroti, where the painting hangs on the ceiling, and to the sponsors, who were Calliope Arts and Christian Levitt. And because of the way that we structured the project, it was actually probably my idea to have it take place in the museum. So the restoration was completely done under the public eye, and in fact the project was called Up Close.
Exactly.
Artemisia Up Close, and people got really close. So that was a little bit concerning because of the security, but it was fabulous. It was such an exciting time. I learned so much from Artemisia herself, and I am in awe of her prowess, because she is an amazing artist. And it was wonderful to work on that painting from that aspect. And as you say, I mean, that is a lot of what we do is very tedious and painstaking, but we get to touch the objects. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do. I have that passion. And to also be able to share that with the public was really a great experience.
And how do people respond? I mean, what do people ask you? I mean, I've been to many. I love it, by the way, too. I love being there and seeing the process and being able to watch the transformation happen. What do people ask you questions? Do they come close? Do they?
Yeah, well, they came very close. I mean, as close as you are now.
Right.
Like, less than a yard away. So sometimes I would get so involved with my cleaning. There was a little cord between us, but there was no window or plexiglass or anything like that. So I remember once I was focusing on cleaning the painting, and I turned around, and to my left, about 2 feet away, there are 2 people just, with their eyes on me and their cameras at the ready. And other experiences too. People are so emotionally involved with Artemisia and her work. So people who traveled from as far away as San Francisco. There was this wonderful woman, Sarah McPhee, who I am still in touch with, and she came, and it was a period where I had COVID, and so I wasn't at work. Yeah. And she had come all the way from San Francisco, she didn't make an appointment or anything, and so we didn't know, and she couldn't see the painting being worked on. She could see the painting, but she couldn't, and she was very upset. And she came back to see it, and so when she saw it, she was so moved that she cried. And I had other people literally on their knees in front of the painting and being moved to tears by the whole fact of being so close to that painting, which you normally see from about 17 feet away.
And have you seen do you think things like this. So doing a restoration in the place where the work hangs, so in its home, how does that change the experience for the viewer? Also, just not only being able to see it up close and personal and to be able to see it in the space where it's meant to be, but also how did people, do you think that bringing people into the process also makes art more accessible? I mean, showing
I think
people...
definitely. I think they realize the physical reality of it. And they are seeing it in a completely different way. I mean, also through our technological advances, we're able to show the works of art in a completely different way. And that was a very important part of this project. And then they also are in tune with the fact that the artist made the painting, either if we're talking about a fresco or maybe something that was done in a church, in that space. And so they're relating to, I'm here, I'm looking at this painting, the artist herself or himself was also here. And that, that just brings out a whole other exciting element to it. So I think it makes it more accessible and just rounds out the experience more.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that I always look forward to when I go to museums, because I really love watching, as I said, the process. And you mentioned that working on the painting, being in such close contact for how long? I mean, how long did the restoration process take, start to finish?
The whole process took about 8 months.
Okay.
So it wasn't really, really long. I mean, sometimes it can take years and years.
I know, but it wasn't short either.
No.
And so you mentioned that this, the close-up experience with this painting confirmed, let's say, her prowess. But
Absolutely.
Did you make any sort of unexpected discoveries, or did the painting, I don't know, speak to you differently, as it was sort of, I don't know, revealing itself to you, if you will?
You form a whole relationship with an artist when you're working on a piece. And I mean, especially one that takes as long as, say, 8 months, and you're seeing it grow day by day and change, and you have a relationship with the artist. And this was a painting in which she put an idealized version of her face. So I am looking at her.
Wow.
And working on her. And so we were communicating on all different levels, really. And one of the things that I found towards the end of the project was a fingerprint that it was undoubtedly made by Artemisia herself.
Oh, wow.
And it was on her leg, and it was made in the fresh paint. So, I mean, it was her original paint. I am sure it was Artemisia.
Yeah.
So that was... And no one had seen that before.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So that was very exciting.
Her actual, fingerprint.
And then, of course, the painting was a censored work. It had been censored by the application of drapery to cover up the nude body.
As was often done.
About 50 years after the painting was painted by another artist who's also a famous Baroque artist, Baldassare Franceschini, Il Volterrano. And it had been decided at the beginning of the project that we were not going to remove the veils. I was able to remove some overpainting that was done even later in the 19th century that covered up her stomach, her belly button, and part of her hip and part of her legs. So that I was able to take off and reveal more of Artemisia. But the rest of the reveal was done through diagnostic analysis and technological, a digital recreation of what the painting looked like without the veils. So we made that available to the public.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's still available through a QR code, which is in the museum. So when you go to see the painting, you can access all of this. It's online, and you can see what the painting looked like without the veils when it was originally done.
Wow. And I think those things are, talking again about how we interact with art, which has changed a lot, and we could talk about that for a long time as well, sort of the way people experience museums today, which sometimes calls into question how much of a relationship there is between the painting and the person, because often, at least here in Florence, you do see a lot of people who are just sort of taking selfies with,
You see them, and the painting's in the background, or the Duomo's in the background,
exactly.
but it's a selfie, right?
But there's
selfie culture.
It's very important, I think, to underscore how fundamental this relationship is between viewer and the artwork, and how the restoration process reveals so much to the spectator, no? And
also, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, but that's a really good point, because Artemisia herself was a master at this. Mm-hmm. She was a master at realizing the relationship between her art, her own personality, her own personal history, and the viewer. Exactly. And she's playing with that. So
you need to look. Yeah. That's it, right? So she's telling you need to look.
Yes.
And then, bringing people into the process is also, as underscoring the importance of preserving these works. Right. Because this is for you.
Yeah.
It's for everyone. It's for everyone, right? This belongs to all of us.
Exactly.
And that's
it's
something
our heritage.
It's exactly. And so we need to be, keepers of this important heritage for all of humanity. And so I'm, in awe of the work you do, because it's also a big responsibility. So, and I know you work in various media, in addition to, you work, basically you restore everything, if I understand.
Well, not I mean, I did have a period in which I was working on marble sculpture, but I'm not doing that anymore. Okay. But I do. It does range in historically all the way from ancient to contemporary paintings on canvas, mostly paintings.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
I do work on polychrome sculpture. Okay. And I also have been teaching at the University of Viterbo in the 5-year master's restoration program, a course which is multimedia. Polymaterial, it's called in Italian, and contemporary. Okay. So that's just crazy. Wow. That's everything. It's like the kitchen sink.
Exactly. So I have 2 questions for you, but I'll do one at a time.
Right.
The first is, I want you to talk a little more about what getting a master's in restoration entails. I think there might be people out there listening who are very interested in this kind of work, interested in studying here in Italy, where there are so many wonderful opportunities to experience art, to to do work. I mean, to do hands-on work. So tell me a little bit more about your teaching and the program.
Okay, well, that program is part of a number of programs in the Italian university system, which offers a 5-year master's program, and it's very thorough. It's the same program that's offered here in Florence at the Opificio delle Pietre Dure, which is the government restoration lab, and we also have one in Rome, which is the Istituto Centrale di Restauro, and they have a school, and there's another big one in Turin, in Veneria. So all of those programs, you need excellent Italian. It's very competitive to get in. There are more introductory programs that you can do where you get a certificate as a conservation technician. Okay. So those are shorter programs. They're easier. They're a good introductory step.
You get your feet wet to see if it's
to see if it's for you.
Okay.
And I would advise looking into one of those programs if one was interested in going on from, say, college, where you would have probably a background either in the visual arts or in art history or even in chemistry or even possibly in physics, because depending on what branch of conservation you want to go into, and there are all kinds of branches, from photography to archaeology to paper. I mean, think of a material and you can conserve it, and
absolutely
you have to. So you can also get into the scientific aspect of it if you want, or more the curatorial aspect. So there are a lot of different ways to go, and there are a couple of American based schools here in Florence that also offer programs that one could look into. And in England, there are definitely many programs. And in the United States, the 3 top programs are the University of Delaware, Winterthur, and SUNY University, Buffalo.
I didn't know.
Yeah. And the third one is NYU, which offers a combined MFA and MA in art history program.
Okay. That's a nice.
Yeah, and those programs are also very hard to get into, but they're free, which is almost unheard of in the United States. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's interesting to know for our listeners.
Yes.
Thank you. And I want to go back to talking about your preferred media to work in, or if you have a preferred time period that you like to work on, or are you just happy to get your hands on anything? Or do you have some a true love?
Well, I mean, there is that. I'm probably going to say it wrong. Ogni scarafone è bella mamma sua.
Right.
You fall in love with the piece you're working on, no matter where it comes from or who did it. Or I have done a lot of work on 17th century painting, so that would probably be one area that I'm particularly specialized in. Okay. I'm interested in. But I mean, anything earlier than that, and then the contemporary stuff is crazy. It's really hard, and it's very interesting to work on because it's so different.
Yeah.
Because the materials are different, and because no one for many years has been teaching about the value of using proper materials, it tends to deteriorate much faster than earlier works of art, which were done with careful techniques. Right. And time-tested, true techniques, whereas lots of experimentation has been going on for years and years in contemporary art. So
now we see
the effects of that. Yeah.
And I'm curious to know like what the typical day of a conservator looks like. Do you want to just tell me like what? Because I imagine you do. I mean, not only are you spending time in your studio or at a museum, but I imagine you're often called for consultations, or people want you to go, I don't know, to another. You talked about Luca at the beginning of your career, but I imagine you're called often to speak about or to. Yeah,
I do consulting work. We're called in to do estimates and to do disaster mitigation. Yeah. And I have worked actually in many places in Italy, and I've done a lot of consulting and conservation work also in New York City, because I've worked with companies who restore theaters and also churches. But I've done a lot of theater mural restoration work. And those are mostly paintings on canvas.
Yeah, how interesting.
But one of my favorite projects was Radio City Music Hall.
You did not.
Yeah, I did.
Do you see this connection though that we have? I'll tell this story at another point. Really?
Yeah. In 2000.
Now that's a nice thing
that
to
was
have
a really,
on your
really
resume.
fun project.
Oh, it's such a great. I mean, it's just the quintessential New York space, right? Oh, how fun!
So that's another. With those projects, a lot of work has been done on WPA murals and things like Radio City, which were done in the 1930s. So that's another time period that I absolutely love. Art Deco and 1930s.
Oh, I love it. And in fact, it's one of my favorite things about, well, there's so many things to love about New York, but that's one of the greatest
And I always
things.
say that the Broadway theaters, and they've been doing a great job of restoring and maintaining them. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the Theater Association, the Broadway Theater Association, has a contribution of $1 for every ticket purchased. $1 goes into a restoration fund.
Oh, that's
so
fantastic.
They've been able to restore all the theaters through the ticket sales.
Well, thank goodness. I didn't know that, and I make a point of going to a Broadway show every time I'm back in the States, in the New York area.
Well,
and
you
now,
contributed.
Well, I know, but see, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that people will know about that. And your job is so multifaceted. It's amazing. I mean, if you think about, just what you were talking about before, I don't know that we stop and think about, like, even if we look around, right? How much, but how much you can do. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating field because you as you mentioned, you can be a consultant, you can do appraisals, you can do curatorial work, or you can be doing the more hands-on stuff, which is really exciting. It seems to have a lot of possibilities.
One thing I want to say two things to a prospective person who's interested in the field. One would be, don't expect to make a lot of money, and it is.
It's a labor of love.
It is very hands-on and it's very labor-intensive. So there are a lot of hours, and unfortunately, we cannot charge, lawyer fees for what we do.
Right.
And then another aspect is something that my Italian restoration professor told us on our first day of school, which was that if you don't have the passion for this field, you're not going to last in it, because you really need to be passionate about what you do and love what you do. I mean, that's true of any profession.
But I think it's particularly true with cultural work.
It kind of carries you through.
Yeah, because you feel, the way I see it is that the work you do is priceless, right? Because you're ensuring that my child, my grandchildren, future generations
hopefully.
will be able to still experience this immense beauty that we are fortunate to experience, right? And then the passing on of knowledge to new generations. So since you do teach, and I imagine you also have experiences with younger interns,
Right.
apprentices, etc. I imagine, is there a big interest in the field? I mean, it seems to be a sexy field, even though it doesn't, maybe it's not that, let's say it's not that lucrative, but I mean, it's an exciting
certainly
field.
it's an exciting field to be here,
Right.
to be
Here
in
in
Italy.
Italy.
And it's very prevalent here in Italy. And Florence is
The
you know,
center.
really
It's really
the
one of the
place.
center.
Yeah, it really
if
is
not-
one
yeah.
of the centers. So it's just a great field to be in here, and I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something people are interested
I mean,
in.
I can't
and
imagine-
And I think projects like the Artemisia one are bringing it more to the public eye.
Exactly, and if you and I could talk about this for hours, but the whole way the museum experience is changing and has been changing, and I think that kind of that experience of also bringing people closer to the reality of what it takes.
Right.
I think people tend to say like, oh, that's really expensive, to pay however much it costs to get to the Uffizi now, to get into the Uffizi now, or any of the major museums in the world. I mean, it's the same if you go to the
Also,
Metropolitan.
of course, all of that ticket money is also contributing
Exactly, but
to the upkeep.
And I wonder how. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I think about that. You obviously do.
Yeah.
But when people, I hear people say, "Wow, that's a lot of money." Well, no, this is a big. It's a big deal. This is, you can't really put a price on the importance of ensuring that future generations will have access to this work. So I'll get off of my little soapbox now. I want to talk more about you and your personal journey here to Italy, if you will. So you're a U.S. expat,
Right.
like me. And you have been living here for how many years now?
I've lost count, but
Okay.
it's
It's been a while.
yeah, it's been 4 decades and going. I think.
I find that hard to believe,
Yeah.
but okay, I'll take your word for it. And how do you experience Florence today? Like compared to, I mean, how does the city speak to you today compared to the way it was for you at the very beginning? Is Florence your I don't know, is it the place of your heart? Has it changed? Do you want to always stay here? Have you ever thought about going back or going somewhere else?
Ooh, that's such a hard question. Florence is, I would say it is the place of my heart. It is certainly one of the places of my heart.
Yeah.
And of course it's changed, and I've changed, so I've changed along with it. I have sometimes a bit of a love-hate relationship with the city, which is so crowded, and I find myself, all these tourists, but then I think, well, honey, you were one too.
Exactly.
So, be a little
No,
more
right.
patient. And of course, it's what keeps Florence going.
Exactly.
But, I think more could be done to make it a city that is viable for students to come and stay, for normal people to rent apartments.
Yeah.
It's going in a direction which is Disneyfication, which I don't like.
I don't either, yeah.
And so that upsets me, but still there are so many hidden corners.
I know. I was thinking
And
the same thing.
I never get tired
Neither
of it.
do I. And it's funny because I was speaking with somebody recently about that, and how tourists always seem to be, or visitors always seem to be keen on finding the undiscovered thing or whatever, and you can actually still find those here.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's
But we're not going to tell everybody.
No, of course not. I'm not actually. We're not going to. Once we're done, you and I will talk about it. No, but it is important, I think, that we talk about these things, because it is a moment where it's not possible to sustain, and so we do have to be thinking creatively about ways that we can all happily coexist.
Yes.
In fundamentally a very small city.
Right.
And so, the kind of stresses that we have on the daily here in a city like Florence are really hard to imagine if you're not actually in the thick of it. And, you see just how small the streets are, or how much, construction work is going on right now, or how much restoration work is going on, across the board. But anyway, that's
another thing you asked me about where my heart is. It's in Florence, but it's also in Tuscany, because there's Florence, but there's also Tuscany.
I know.
So, there's so many places.
It's true.
And they're so beautiful.
And accessible. Again, like easy to reach. I think, coming from the US, we have a different concept of space, and I think when I first moved here, but even like earlier on when I just had a baby and, trying to navigate the streets with a stroller, and I'm thinking,
yes.
What was I thinking? What was I thinking? My life could be so much easier, Of course. And so even things like that, sort of the challenges that come with less space, or, the need to sort of, how hard it is to do refurbishing or restoration work in small spaces. I imagine that's something you've also had to deal with, like sometimes you see these, these streets that seem impossibly narrow, and then they end up being like two-way streets, or you go into these crazy spaces that are so surprising, and I'm sure you've
well, I think my studio is one of them, because it's a fairly small space. Luckily, we have very high ceilings, so we can fit in the tall paintings, but we have a restriction, which is I think 2 meters and 37 centimeters is the diagonal of our door. So a panel painting that's more than that can't get through, and we have to do it somewhere else. But yeah, we're all used to navigating with small spaces here, and even pavements. And,
exactly, and you just you accept that as just part of you live in a city that's a medieval Renaissance city.
And it wasn't made for
cars. It wasn't made for cars. It wasn't made for any of this, and so we sort of do the best we can. Is there something you're working on now that you're excited about?
Yeah, there is.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I'm working on right now. I'm working on 4 paintings from the Medici Riccardi Palace. That are paintings that are going to possibly be part of a new museum itinerary in the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, because these are paintings that were in the presidential suite, which I didn't even know existed.
I didn't know that
but
existed
it's in the part, because there's the Medici Riccardi Palace Museum, where the Medici Chapel is by Benozzo Gozzoli and the Luca Giordano and everything. But then the other part of it is the political area. It's the Prefettura, which is the prefecture.
Yeah.
Okay. So those rooms have a set of rooms that are decorated beautifully, and dignitaries stay in them when they come to Florence, such as the President of Italy.
I had no idea.
And these paintings come from that area, but they're going to be opening up a part of that to visitors.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's interesting.
Oh, good. Thank you for that.
And then the other work that my colleague and I, Nicoletta Fontani, are just working on finishing is a painting that we've been working on for years. It's a panel painting, and it was one of my most challenging and difficult conservation projects, because it was a painting that was done in 1500 by Sebastiano Mainardi, who was Ghirlandaio's main apprentice. He was his brother-in-law, and he ended up taking over the Ghirlandaio workshop.
Wow.
But he worked on all the main Ghirlandaio frescoes in Santa Maria Novella.
How wonderful.
And Ghirlandaio's panel paintings, Santa Trinita, etc., etc. And he did this painting for a little church outside of Florence. It's in the church of Santa Maria di Campi, and it was in 2 floods, at least 2 floods, and it was repainted many times. And in one of the repaintings, we found out in the second half of the 19th century, they painted out the baby Jesus.
No.
It is, it's a Madonna. When we got the painting, it was a Madonna with holding a heart with 7 swords stuck in it, and she was flanked by 2 saints. One of the saints had a butcher knife in his head, and therefore was identified with a saint called San Pietro Martire, Dominican saint, and then the other saint is a papal saint. He's a pope.
Okay.
We still don't know the identity of the pope, but we found through diagnostics that there was actually a baby Jesus who had been painted out of the picture. The Madonna had been given a fake arm. The heart with the 7 swords was also fake, and underneath that she was holding a book. So it was a very serene painting. She was reading, there was a baby, he was looking at the Pope, and then the other saint, the saint with a knife in his head, the knife had been painted in. And underneath the knife, and these were all really difficult things to remove, underneath the knife was the face of Saint Dominic. So it wasn't Saint Peter Martyr at all.
How bizarre.
It's very bizarre, very interesting. It's a detective story, which is another part of our
really
work.
Cool part of your work.
Yeah.
Because
so I'm looking forward to we're almost finished with that project, which has taken a long time.
How long has it been?
Oh, well, it's embarrassing to say, because we got the painting almost 10 years ago, but the church had raised the funds to do the restoration, and the funds were diverted because the church itself started sliding into the Bizantia River. So they had to restore the church. So they cut the funding, and we kept going for a little while, but then we thought, this is silly.
Right.
And so the painting stayed in our studio for a number of years.
Okay.
And then I had a wonderful client who became impassioned with the story, and he decided to sponsor a big part of the restoration.
That's fantastic. Thank goodness that there are so many generous people.
So in late spring, we're going to have the inauguration.
Oh, and that's so exciting. Thank you. I can't wait to come. Well, now that I know that there's this whole intricate story behind it, because, I do think we tend to take things at face value, but then, you were saying, all these surprises, right? So the painting.
Yeah, and this is something that we've been doing in our studio. So nobody really knows about this except for the people in the church and people from the Superintendenza who evaluate everything that we do. So we've had various meetings, and it also has taken a long time, because every time we found something, we had to stop and document, and then everyone had to decide, well, should we go in there and remove the knife or the heart or whatever? And so we had to get permission to do all that.
How interesting.
So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things, though, I think that those kinds of projects, you're really bringing the authentic work, what it was intended to be. To and then again back to its original space and its original splendor, hopefully, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's not going to be its original splendor because it's been so damaged.
Well,
but
poor painting. It's been through a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be a painting that is over 500 years old and is in good shape.
Exactly. So not its original splendor, but definitely considering the poor, the trials and tribulations, not bad. So I want to talk a little bit quickly about how we know each other, because I want to talk a little bit about WIN,
our wonderful
group. And so I am very lucky to be a part of this group, and I met you about a year ago through the group. And it's something that has become a very important part of my life, and I think it's absolutely one of the most interesting group of international women that I've ever encountered. So I want you, because you are the president of the board, the co-president of the board, I do want you to talk a little bit about the Women's International Network, WIN, and what we do, how you got involved, and why it's so important to have groups like this, especially today.
Okay. Well, Women's International Network has been part of my life since the early 2000s. The group was founded something like 1991.
Exactly.
And it was originally a bunch of American expats who were looking for a place where they could share their experiences and support each other in their professional and their personal lives, because they were encountering difficulties that they didn't have, experience with in their home country. And so that's how it started. And it has blossomed. We're well over 100 members now from many different countries. Yeah. English is our spoken go-to language, so the meetings are all conducted in English. And we're here for each other. And basically, I find it just amazing, the variety of women that we have, of all ages, and the fields that they're in. We just had our members fair, which, you've been a big part of that. And so we had 16 members exhibiting their work and showing what they do and talking about that. And that is what we do. We help each other. And we also inform each other because
Exactly.
we have speakers. You, Fosca, have been an incredible part of that because you brought us some fantastic, interesting, challenging speakers. And so we meet once a month, and we have 7 meetings in which we have speakers, and then the other 3 meetings are dedicated to more recreational. We have a holiday party, we have a garden party ending the season in June, and then we have a September get-together party. And it has given me so many lasting friendships, contacts. My work with women artists started through a contact that I made through Women's International Network. Even though I had already had my career and I'd been here for a while, the contacts just never stopped.
Exactly, and it's funny that you said that because for years I was resistant to the idea. I think I probably told you.
Yeah.
And it was because I was so proud. Like I wore my insider, status like a badge of honor. No, I'm an Italian sort of, I have an Italian family, I have my whole, and so I sort of removed myself from that also because I had it at work. I had it at Stanford, so I had the US aspect all the time. So I didn't feel like anything was missing, Right. And then, this really interesting series of events that brought me to WIN. And, I went in really hesitant. And not hesitant, but not convinced 100%. Okay, I'll come to a meeting. We'll see what happens, right? I was blown away because first of all, just how exciting it is to be in a room with so many incredible women from all over the world doing amazing things. But as you mentioned, having speakers come in, so always being engaged, learning, but